So I will give you a quick presentation about the PhD programs in the School of Computer Science here. If anyone has any clarification questions, feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand, and Jen will alert me to their existence since it's hard to do that when you're talking. At the end, there'll be plenty of time for questions, especially since we started early. So as I mentioned a minute ago, I'm Bob Frederking. I'm the Associate Dean for Doctoral Programs in the School of Computer Science. I've been here essentially forever. I got my PhD in the Computer Science department many, many decades ago in the 20th century. And I'm also the chair of graduate programs for the Language Technologies Institute. So after the general introduction, I will be available to talk about Language Technologies Institute questions. So welcome everyone to this Zoom session. And Sean talked about most of these things. We were started by Andrew Carnegie and his banker, Andrew Mellon, back around 1900. Carnegie was interesting because he was very much like Bill Gates. In his early years, he was kind of this ruthless industrial guy who made gigantic amounts of money. And then later on, he became this wonderful philanthropist who did all kinds of great things. And so one of the great things he did, in addition to starting libraries and concert halls all over the country, was he started Carnegie Mellon with his banker friend. And as Sean said, we're tied for #1 in computer science worldwide. And so we're very happy about that. So I wanted to just very quickly discuss how basically all science PhDs in the US work. When I applied to my PhD program, I didn't know a lot of this, so I thought it'd be useful to go over this. And basically, it's pretty similar across the sciences. The PhD in the American and British system is called the highest degree that you can get in an area. So in some other countries, there's a degree beyond the PhD, but in the American and British system, it's the highest degree you can get in an area. So you start usually with some classes and taking care of some other requirements, including teaching. Generally, there's at least one teaching requirement everywhere because you might end up teaching later. Many places have qualifying exams. I think currently none of the PhD programs in the School of Computer Science have quals. And then kind of the main point of the PhD program is to carry out directed research with an advisor. And it's a kind of an apprenticeship, really. So people often have said that we actually don't know how to teach people to do research. But what you do is you do research with someone who knows how to do it, and you do it for a while, and eventually they think you can do it yourself. And so you get your doctorate when they've decided that you've demonstrated that you're able to do research yourself. In addition to the fact that the GEMS fellows are all funded, we actually fund all of our PhD students with research assistantships. So at the best computer science schools, everyone is funded, and you get a stipend, which is basically enough of a salary to live on in Pittsburgh. It's not a giant amount of money, but you'll have giant amounts of money later. It's to allow you to study without worrying about your finances while you're in school. And kind of the main point of the PhD is the dissertation, and it starts with a thesis proposal. The target for the PhD programs in CME, School of Computer Science, is about 5 years. Most people take 6, but if we made the target 6, most people would take 7. So the target's about 5. And so around year 3, you'll have most of your requirements, assuming you are admitted and come here. Around year 3, you'll do a thesis proposal. This involves finding an interesting topic that nobody's done before, and your advisor helps you find this. And then you put together a committee, called a thesis committee or a dissertation committee, with your advisor, several other local members, and an external member from some other institution. And the reason I always tell people you do this, it'd be a really bad thing if you worked on a topic for a couple of years, then you found out that your advisor was the only person in the world who thought this was interesting, right? That would be bad. So this is kind of a test at the beginning to make sure that you can find other people who think this is a topic worthy of a PhD. And the reason why there's an external member from another institution is because it would also be bad if only people at CMU thought what you're doing is interesting. And so your committee determines when they think you're done, by having done significant new research in an area and writing it up and presenting the dissertation. And so the proposal is a public event. In principle, anybody in the world can show up and ask you questions. And then you go off, assuming your proposal is approved by your committee, you go off and work on your thesis for a year or two, maybe a little more. I took 2.5, I think. And when your thesis committee thinks you're done, then you have written up your work, you've done something new and interesting, and you do a thesis defense where you present the work you've done. Your committee asks you questions, you have to answer them, and it's an oral exam to demonstrate that you really know what you're doing. And once you pass your thesis defense, you're a doctor. Typically there are changes in the write-up and things you have to do afterwards, but once the committee is happy with your presentation and your dissertation, you're a doctor. And I said before, this is the highest degree in the American system that you can get. So quick history of computer science at CMU. So the school as itself was established around 1900. Computer science department was started in 1965. And Herb Simon, who was one of our Nobel laureates here, was really kind of responsible for the whole thing happening. And a large part of the reason why we're tied for first is because we started so early. Herb Simon was actually originally an economist, and he got his Nobel for work in economics because you can't actually get one in computer science. That's why there's a Turing Award. And so Herb had this, he didn't have his Nobel yet, but people were pretty sure he was going to get one. And so he had a lot of weight on campus. And he said, these computer things sound really interesting. Let's get one. And so in the late 50s, CMU bought a computer, mostly because Herb wanted one. And so they started working on this. And already at the end of the 50s, Herb Simon and Alan Newell, and Herb brought Alan to CMU. Herb and Alan kind of started AI. There was this famous conference in Dartmouth around 1958 where they invented AI. And Newell and Simon, most people just showed up and they were going to argue about what AI is.
Just a quick note that most of the individual Zoom meetings for the various programs will be starting shortly. Exactly 2:30, so we'll take a little break and things will get going very soon. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Well, that's interesting. I think I will keep going and see if more people show up at 2:30. Anyhow, most of the people showed up at this 1958 conference just to argue about what AI is. Newell and Simon showed up with a working AI program. The logic theorist that would prove theorems, and people were more or less stunned. And so it's kind of been going since then. I did my PhD starting in 1979, so I was actually here before the Robotics Institute started, and that was the first other department. And then as things grew, in 1989, the School of Computer Science was established. Because basically the computer science department was so large, it was too big to govern anymore. You kind of can't have a meeting with 200 faculty members. And so they formed a school, started teaching undergraduates, and the whole thing kind of grew out of the computer science department and inherited its culture. And so we've got 7 departments within the School of Computer Science. I'll talk more about them in the next slide. The PhD programs are run by the departments. I actually oversee them as the associate dean, but they're primarily run within each department. And we actually have more than 7 PhD programs. The Institute for Software Research has 2, and we also have some joint PhD programs. And there's a large number of MS programs that are being talked about in parallel to this session. And we have several undergrad majors in computer science and a number of undergrad minors. So, so the programs, the departments rather, the computer science department is the oldest and largest one. These are ranked roughly in order of size and when they started. And they kind of do the core computer science things. Then we have the Robotics Institute, which obviously works on robots, all aspects of robotics. The Language Technologies Institute, which is my home department still, where we work on working with human languages and computers. So we don't do programming language design. That's in the school of in the computer science department. But we do human languages. The Human Computer Interaction Institute, which does that. The Machine Learning Department, the Institute for Software Research has 2 PhD programs, one in software engineering and one in societal computing. And our newest department is the Computational Biology Department, which is a number of years old at this point. We also have some joint programs. So one of the things we talk about that's kind of different at CMU than some other places in computer science is that we have students really start their research as soon as they get here. So some places you have to wait for a while to get an advisor. And we make really sure that students are doing research in their first semester. Day one, maybe not day one, but day 3 or something. And so the first semester you'll get like into a research group and get used to doing research in the part of the field that your advisor works in and goes from there. We also have what we like to call the reasonable person principle, which basically says everyone tries to deal with each other in a reasonable fashion. We try not to make a million rules about everything. And in return, we try not to like find some loophole that someone forgot to outlaw that's clearly not what you should do. And as I mentioned before, there's full funding for PhD students while they're making good progress. So one thing that is of great interest, of course, to people, actually, sorry, I was going to mention one more thing. I have to look at my notes. One thing I was going to mention is that I said briefly that the reason why we have multiple departments is because we have too many faculty. Basically, there's like 250 or more faculty now just in the School of Computer Science. You can't have a faculty meeting with 250 people. It's hard enough with 30. And so because we're all really different parts of computer science, there's a sense that there should be low walls between the departments. So it is very common for faculty to advise students in different departments, and it's not unusual for students to have co-advisors. So for example, one of the things that's going on now these days is people trying to build systems for talking to robots. And so if you're doing talking to robots, it's entirely possible that a faculty member in the Robotics Institute will have a student in LTI, or a faculty member in LTI will have a student in robotics. And there's a lot of crossover between HCII and robotics and HCI and LTI, machine learning and computer science, and so on. So it's really based on people's interests and what makes a reasonable, coherent research program. But we try very hard not to worry too much about the walls between the programs. So, one thing that's of course great interest if you're applying to PhD programs is how admissions is done. And I certainly had absolutely no idea how this worked when I was applying to PhD programs. So let me just go over that in some detail. Basically, the first thing we do is the first thing we do in the process is we try to forecast how many funded positions we're going to have. So since we fund our students from research grants, we have to, it's a very, very difficult estimation problem because we have to make these decisions in January and the government somehow doesn't know that school starts in August. And so they will start programs whenever they're ready. And so they'll start some new research program at a random time during the year. And the faculty have typically put in a bunch of grant proposals to the different funding agencies to try to get research funding, which will pay for PhD students. One of the big open secrets about academia is that most of the work is actually done by the PhD students doing their PhDs. The faculty members guide them, and it's very important for them to apply their expertise, but they're busy enough running the projects and trying to get grants and trying to take care of their students that most of the day-to-day work is actually done by the students under their direction, which is how the students learn how to do research. And so in each department, this is a kind of a generic description of the different departments. Each department does its own PhD admissions within the School of Computer Science. But this is kind of the generic idea of what they all do. And so each department will try to forecast how many new PhD students they think they can afford in the fall in each of the different areas they work in. And then there's a joint application for the School of Computer Science. And by the way, the due date is December 10th this year. That will receive a large number of applications. Most of the programs have so many applications that it's a problem. It's a lot of work to get through these applications and make good decisions on them. On the website, if you've taken the GRE, you put in your GRE scores. The GREs are optional this year. If you're not a native speaker of English, there's a test called a TOEFL that demonstrates that you can speak English. That's only for obviously people who are not, Native American speakers, and then you get your transcripts sent in. You request letters. The letters don't have to be here on December 10th. We know that it takes a while to get people to write letters, but we need to know who the letter writers are going to be. And so you need to have your letter writers lined up. And kind of the most important part of all this is the statement of purpose and the recommendation letters. So the recommendation letters should be from people who kind of like really know you and know what you're doing, and should have a good opinion of you. The statement of purpose is where you say why you want a PhD. You can describe any hardships you've overcome. You can describe any interesting things you've done in computer science. But it's really kind of your argument to the admissions committee about why we should admit you to a PhD. And you can describe whatever, whatever your computer science interests are. For anybody who just joined me, I will circle back to the beginning again at the end since I started early, if anybody needs that or wants that. So then once we've got all these applications and we've decided how many new PhD students we think we can afford in a department, the admissions committee meets and basically ranks all the applicants. And this is not the final say. This is kind of to help us think about hundreds or maybe 1,000 applicants to a PhD program. All the faculty can't look at all of these. And so the admissions committee tries to do a rough ranking, and they will rank many more than we actually can admit, right? So we're going to try very hard not to eliminate anyone who looks, even potentially possible as an admit. But the admissions committee will rank the applicants, and then there's typically an admissions meeting, and in many departments is the whole faculty or a large subset of the faculty, and they basically go through the list, starting at the top, figuring out who they actually want to admit, and they will review the material again that was in the application. And I think most of them make a concerted effort to be sure to consider carefully anybody who looks interesting but didn't make the top of the list. And because we know that there's a lot of competition for the people who are good enough to get into our PhD program, we assume that we will not get some. And so this is kind of the second hard estimation problem, is when we admit people, we actually admit more than we want to take, because we're going to assume some fraction of them are going to go other places, and we try to guess what that number is. And so we basically admit people until we think we're full. We admit enough people that we think we're going to get the number of people we want, and hope that works out the way we planned it. And then we've got our list, and we send out our letters, and then we try hard to recruit the people we've admitted, right? So we've done that. I mentioned already, it was a surprise to me when I was applying to PhD programs. It's free, even without a GEMS fellowship. At the best places, the computer science PhDs are funded by research. And at different schools, there's different decisions about when you get assigned an advisor. Some places do it upon admission. Most departments in the School of Computer Science have a match process. where we match people to advisors upon arrival, essentially. And then in many schools, you get your advisor after passing quals, but there are no qualifying exams in school computer science, so that doesn't happen here. I'm going to talk about a couple of CMU-specific things that I think are interesting, and then see if there are any questions. Maybe just the first two. The third one you don't have to worry about yet, by any means. But this idea of being matched when you arrive, basically there's something that's traditionally called the immigration course. Many departments call it orientation now, not to confuse actual immigrant students. It's done after kind of the school-wide student orientation, before and during the first couple weeks of classes. And basically there are full-time talks for a number of days, giving you an overview of the department, and also having individual faculty research presentations. So these are the faculty who got their grants and they need students. And so they are all trying to convince you that they are, you know, the person you should have as your thesis advisor. So the new students go to all these talks. That way they become familiar with what's going on in the department. They can also think about who they want to have as their research advisor. And then there's this matching process that most of the departments use, where the student has one-on-one meetings with potential advisors and tries to figure out who they think the best match is, and try to convince them that, you know, I'm the student you should take, because the advisors are talking to multiple students too. So there's this kind of free market thing going on. And so the students pick a set of choices, who their first, second, and third choices are for advisors. The advisors also produce lists of choices, and then there's a match committee in each department that finds the optimum match based on people's preferences. And so sometime during the first semester, it's different times for different departments, students get matched to their new advisors. So I see we have about 4 or 5 people who joined after I started really early. So let me ask if there are any questions about any of this. There'll also be time to ask questions later of the specific programs, but if there are any questions related to the overall overview, this would be a good time to ask. And if not, I think the individual programs are supposed to start at 2:45.
There are a couple of questions in chat.
Okay, good.
One question is someone already interested in 2 departments, should they apply to both?
Yes, it's perfectly fine to apply to 2, and the application fee waiver we give you is good for 2 programs. So you don't have to worry about the application fee. Applying to 2 is not unusual. It's a bad idea to apply to 8 because people don't believe you're serious. So it's pretty easy to imagine how you'd have interest crossing 2 departments, but you know, don't apply to 8. Yeah.
And if you already sent in your GRE, will it be looked at during the admissions process, even though it's optional? The second part of that is for the robotics program, it was labeled as strongly recommended. And I would say in particular to that second piece, please do go to the robotics Zoom session, because they'll be able to answer anybody who's interested in robotics directly to give a better answer.
Right, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to try to avoid saying anything department specific, because you can talk to the individual departments later. I will be online for the LTI, and I can answer more general questions too. What was the first half again?
The first half is how it will it be looked at in the admissions process, even though it's optional.
Yeah, so there's a web page connected to the admissions. On the admissions web page, there's a link to the fact that the GRE is optional this year, and each program has stated what their opinion of optional is. So some of them won't look at it. Some of them have said they're not going to look at GRE scores. Other departments don't think that's the best thing to do, and so other departments are actually going to consider it, but they're going to fully consider people who don't have one too. Again, because we get one thing that's difficult, we know that there are serious problems with the GRE. On the faculty side, they're worried about not having them at all because we get so many applications and it's hard to tell if someone's from a small school we haven't really seen before, it's hard to tell, if they're straight A's or what that actually means. Whereas if they get straight A's and they ace the GREs, that's a good hint. But we're, fully considering people who don't have GREs this year.
Another question is, once accepted into the PhD for computer science program, is it possible to switch to a more specific graduate program, such as machine learning, joint neural computation?
Right. So some of the joint programs have their own applications. You should realize that the computer science PhD is not like a more general version of the other ones. They're really parallel. So if what you want is robotics or HCI or comp bio, you really should apply to that program. The CSD program is for people who are interested in like kind of computers as computers, right? So like programming languages, architecture design, things like that, and the other areas the computer science department does. It'd be a good idea to talk to the computer science folks, the CSD folks on their link after this. But that's not a more general version of the other ones. You should really kind of pick the thing you really want to do.
Another question is, how important is it to reach out to faculty before we apply to the robotics department?
Yeah, so for robotics, you should talk to them about that. In general, we don't, as I mentioned, most of the departments don't assign advisors at the beginning, so it's not crucial. But it's a good idea to kind of get an idea of what the department does. And on some of them, they want you to actually pick people you're interested in. And so it's a good idea to look through their website materials, and you can talk to them at the breakout sessions at the separate Zooms. But it's not a crucial thing. But each department can tell you how much they really value that if you talk to them separately.
Will people without STEM majors, possibly STEM minors, are they equally considered?
Yeah, so in order to succeed, so my home department is language technologies, and in language technologies, we often have people with linguistics backgrounds who want to do computer stuff with linguistics, with languages. And the thing we found is that it's important for them to have some computer background. So it's important that you've had some, either computer science or, like kind of like computer science oriented math, some previous exposure to computer science, because it's just too hard if you show up with no computer background. You're probably not going to succeed. And so it's certainly fine to have a different major, but it's probably important to have some computer science courses in your undergrad. For most people.
If someone has research experience from industry but cannot present the research due to NDAs, can this negatively impact them?
Well, so the thing to do there would be to talk to your manager probably and ask them for a letter, actually. So industrial research, letters from people at good labs doing industrial research is a perfectly fine letter for one of your letters. So ask them to tell us whatever they can about how great you are. There was a very funny thing that happened one year, just as a little anecdote. One of the students that applied from one of the major AI companies you've heard of, 2 of their letters said, they did this fabulous secret project I can't tell you anything about, but it was stupendous. It changed our whole way of doing things. And the 3rd letter told us exactly what they did, which we thought, oh, cool, so that's the big secret. So that was a mistake. But have your manager write us a letter, I say would be the best solution for that.